COFI bill was sent to the state legal advisors to have a final look at it before it goes to Parliament. It has not gone to Parliament yet. So I thought last year in November, we might see a COFI promulgation on the 1st of April. My best guess is that with everything that we've heard and have not heard in the first 2 months of this year, promulgation is unlikely to be the 1st of April. Why do I say the 1st of July? Simply because I think COFI has become a bit of an embarrassment for National Treasury and the FSCA for the following reason. Is since 2020, when I think for the last 5 years, if we go to the FSCA reports, in the first paragraph, COFI was also mentioned as a key focus area for the FSCA and National Treasury. So we are very close to promulgation of the COFI bill becoming an act. Then typically with phase, we had about 18 months before full implementation. My guess is that we will see at least a 2-year promulgation period allowing for the industry to prepare, and it's more likely to be 3 years simply because product suppliers and all of the other stakeholders in the industry are also part of this whole COFI journey. However, if 1 July is the promulgation date, it means that businesses has got 36 months to get their act in order, get their facelifts ready, and before full implementation. And if you break it down in that way, then you've got 36 months, maybe with some change, to start with your process. Now, then you've got 36 months. If you wait to start your COFI transition plan to dust off the components that you can dust off, you've got fewer months to get 71 parts of your business cleaned up. So that's the point I want to make. And how do you eat that elephant? Because COFI can have this overwhelming, burdensome experience. It can create that. But we'll need to break that down. And this is really, for the 20 minutes I'm given, your compliance officers can tell you what COFI is about, et cetera, et cetera. But for me, it's really for the smaller businesses to get themselves ready so that they don't need to back out and sell in a panic or join in a panic. So to give them a fair opportunity to get the smaller businesses ready and then avoid this situation where you are just so overwhelmed with all the regulatory stuff that you lose perspective, because there is a way that you can accommodate and plan for this. For you to start your journey, it will be very important to calm down, you do what you do, and then you spend an allocated hour or 2 a month to start breaking down your plan and your improvement and implementation strategy. You can either do it yourself, you can use ChatGPT, but I'll show you the limitations there. I'll also show you the do-it-yourself option challenges. You can depend on your compliance officer, although I have not seen any implementation strategy. Most people are waiting for COFI to be promulgated. I think that may be an expensive lesson that some Ps are going to learn, because there are ways that you can start dusting off certain areas in your business right now. There's an FSP Business 4.0 option, which I will share with you in a few minutes. Why do I say the do-it-yourself is going to be a challenge? Now, I'm at the front end of the COFI development. We've got a business, Trusted Advisors PI Solutions. We only focus on PI insurance. That is what we offer to the market. And this business, with 3 people who are part of the governing body, we have had a look at COFI. We've already got an implementation strategy, and so far it has taken hours just to cover one discipline in that business. So how can we, as a small business, help other small businesses to follow a very dedicated, proactive COFI implementation strategy? And I'll share that in a minute just now. This is the idea, ladies and gentlemen. I would strongly urge you not to wait for COFI to be implemented because you haven't got enough time to work on your business and make sure that you are COFI ready. Trusted Advisors PI Solutions, we actually spent 2 strategic planning sessions, 2 half days, making it a full day, just to cover our leadership, appointing the governing body in our business, understanding and unpacking what those leadership qualities needs to be to function as a leading organization under COFI, as a small business, and then to document our culture and governance. 1 full day, just the foundation. So we'd like to save some of the smaller businesses that effort. We're going to do it ourselves. We are using ChatGPT, and we have identified 5 pillars in our business to take care of the 80-20, the 20% of components of COFI that will bring us an 80% of effectiveness and preparation for COFI within the next 12 months, leaving us 24 months to cater for conduct standards to be published that may be published before the implementation of COFI. So we've got a very slick, monthly broken down COFI transition plan. We started with using ChatGPT like any good, solid business person today. We jump onto ChatGPT and say, listen, I don't want to pay a consulting fee. Just help me. How are we going to transition from phase to COFI? Now, ChatGPT, in its wisdom, kicked out 8 points. That's how you do it. Then we applied our own challenges individually, and we had to add all the elements in red to say that, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, I can promise you, you are welcome to try using ChatGPT as your guide to transition from phase to COFI. We found it coming short every single time. It's a great point of departure, but if you do not apply human intervention for people who've been in the industry for 30, 40 years and use that wisdom to transition, then I think you're going to sell yourself short. So this operational framework under phase, this is what it looked like. You have your client engagement. This is where you give advice. This is where your money is earned. The more money you earn going into the business, then you allocate capital to all these divisions, and either you make a profit or a loss, and every company, every FSP wants to grow their profits. This under phase looked like that. Under COFI, those elements, those components are going to remain the same, but they are going to get a facelift. So there's about a 10-15% facelift from the COFI subordinate legislation like fit and proper and the General Code of Conduct. The bulk of that is going to be transferred into the COFI conduct standards with a bit of a facelift. We know what that facelift is going to look like, and I'll explain to you why. So, colleagues, the first thing I'm going to give to you And this community for free is that Rochelle Miley and myself, we are in the dying days of completing our next manual on solving the COFI puzzle. It's a manual with an excess of 400 pages breaking down those elements, 53 chapters that will help you in your preparation for the COFI Act. But the thing is, you're going to have to approach this very wisely because of the information overload, of all the other pieces of regulation, of regulatory fatigue that most people are experiencing. So I'm going to give you a positive perspective on this. Now, we have got two businesses. The one is the Trusted Advisors PI Solutions, that is currently a juristic representative, but we plan to be an independent brokerage for PI Solutions. And the reason why we created that business is we did not want to be an academic contributor to this phase to COFI transition. We wanted to demonstrate that you can, as a small business, transition from phase to COFI successfully. So that's on the one hand, and we've got a number of clients since last year, so we're very happy that that business is growing. But you need that business to be COFI ready, and that's why we have created templates, minutes of meetings, etc. So we are well down the way of strategic implementation of COFI. On the left-hand side, you'll see the logo is a business, FSP Business 4.0. And that business is created to give you guidelines. And these are the founding members. Johan Maria is in Australia. Tony, you should remember Johan. He's the pioneer of practice management in South Africa decades ago. He now resides in Australia. Myself, Francois de Toy of Propulsion. Many of you would know Francois, and Marius is then the tech guy that has created this website, this online platform for us to assist guys. The first thing you can do, gratis nogal, is a COFI readiness assessment. Our first assessment consists of 150 questions to determine whether you're ready or not. We are now in the process of trimming them down to about 120 questions, because COFI can be a big elephant. One just needs to be very prudent, very clear-minded as you approach them. What people may not realize is that to some extent, COFI is going to pull phase and FICA together, where FICA needs to kick in the client engagement process. There's a specific step in that client engagement process where phase, the conduct standards that are not published yet, COFI promulgated from 1 July, and FICA all comes together. And that's why you're going to need a client engagement policy. It's one of the things that you will need to consider. And we are way down the line at Trusted Advisors PI Solutions to formulate that. And through the FSP business, we will be giving those templates as guidelines away under that model. You need to consider whether you're going to be an early adopter or a late adopter of COFI. And this is the calculation we have made. From the 12,000 plus and some change FSPs, about 6,000 will be our type of market, giving long-term investment advice, etc. And of that, about 16% will be early adopters. So we are looking, like Trusted Advisors PI Solutions, to be part of the early adoption of phase to COFI transition. And these are some of the plans that you will need to consider. If you want to be an early adopter, the positive is you can break it down in eatable chunks over the next 36 months. And this is our plan for the first 12 months. March and April will create awareness of FSP Business 4.0. We will break it down in pillars and the foundation on a monthly basis. So we already have got a strategic plan and a diary planned. So on our platform for subscribers, you can then participate in this phase to COFI transition process. We have got an early bird offer. So for the guys who write up in March, depending on the size of your business, that's going to be the monthly fee. And over the next 3 years, we will be making sure that early adopters can transition successfully from phase to COFI. And if you, and with that I close and I leave the rest for some questions and answers, Tony, whether you want that as a panel discussion or whatever. So colleagues, just take maybe a photo of this QR code, and if you are interested that we should contact you and send our value proposition to you if you want to join the journey of your phase to COFI implementation plan, if you want to be part of that first adoption, early adopter community, you are most welcome to contact us. We will respond and put you on that early bird list. So that is for now. I think I'm very close to that 20 minutes that you have given me, Tony.
100%. Thank you so much, Anton. That was fascinating. I think it sort of shows the importance of, the fact that you need to in some way be able to take care of compliance in an efficient way, because otherwise, I mean, the stuff that you spoke about is almost overwhelming. As you say, it's an elephant. And yeah, it can literally just take all your time. I just, before we move on to Jaco, I just wanted to ask you one or two things. I think the first one is, and excuse my ignorance here if this question has been answered or not, but so COFI will basically take all the past little compliance things that you did and bring it into one. Is that almost what's happening?
Tony, if I can be a little bit more specific. So if you take the phase legislation with the fit and proper requirements published as a board notice, and the general code of conduct. So phase will become COFI on steroids. So COFI is now not only going to hold FSPs accountable, it's also going to hold product providers accountable on the same level. So in other words, that is a twist. There's now one set of rules and principles across the board. So you take phase, you give it a bit of a Red Bull or two, and it is phase on steroids. So there, those principles, governance, and culture is going to get a facelift, a significant facelift. There's going to be a fit and proper requirements in terms of phase is now going to be absorbed under the COFI conduct standards. So even there, the current fit and proper requirements is going to get a slight facelift, but it's then going to be known as the COFI conduct standard for fit and proper requirements. And then the general code of conduct, there will be conduct standards for specific activities or client engagement processes. There's, for example, your client complaints process will be published as a separate conduct standard under COFI. And the interesting thing is, and with that I close, is that conduct standards can be published before COFI is implemented or promulgated even. So the Financial Sector Regulation Act has got an ability for the regulator to publish conduct standards even before COFI is promulgated or implemented. We've seen that with Conduct Standard 3 for banks. So the principles of COFI has already been published in a conduct standard for banks, and we have learned quite a lot out of that. So I hope that answers your question, Tony.
It certainly does. And I just wanted to add to that then, you mentioned the 71 points or parts of this. And just to get a bit of clarity for myself, in terms of the process and in terms of if one is an early adopter, you could now eat this thing in chunks. So you don't have to have this one massive project
Yes.
to try and get into COFI. You can actually set yourself these different milestones and
Absolutely.
bit by bit get there.
Absolutely. We started with a foundation, which is leadership. We know that everything rises and falls based on the leadership and the leadership decisions made in FSPs. We deal with different levels of leadership in our industry, that's for sure. Not all leaders or business owners are operating at the same level. So that is the first part. And then culture and governance is one of those areas that if you don't base your amendments, your improvements, starting with culture and governance. That's why I've used that cartoon to say this whole phase to COFI thing has got to have a foundation. And the first month we're going to spend on stress testing the documented evidence that FSPs have in their business with regards to their leadership. They need to appoint a governing body. That governing body has got the certain responsibilities, and then culture and governance is the governing body's responsibility. I close with this statement. The COFI Act specifically states that the governing body is accountable to embed a ethical culture and a TCF culture in the business. That is the start. If you don't have that, you've got no foundation under COFI.
And we'll chat about that a little bit later. Thank you for that, Anton. After we've heard from Jaco, because I want to try and pull this together in terms of the expert focusing purely on compliance and then the business and advisor side as well. So Jaco, you come in here with the person who has to help people eat that elephant and make sure that it actually is eaten to the full. So if you can just give us a little bit of your perspective on the COFI bill, but also in general on compliance and what the challenges are with how advisors in the short term as well as in the long term are sort of coping with compliance or not coping with compliance.
Sure. Tony, thank you very much. I must say I resonate at this particular point with a lot that Anton has had to say this morning. I'm an individual that comes a long way in the industry. I've spent the past 25 years in broker practice. I've been a broker myself in the market and to some degree still involved myself in the broker fraternity. But about 10 years ago, so I've moved across to this particular aspect of compliance and what business is doing in terms of compliance. Now, the challenges are, firstly, COFI is going to have a significant shift in exactly the same sentiment that Anton has shared. And although there are many, many areas of focus, the key pillars of focus and all the concerns or challenges that business is going to face is a demonstration of business conduct on one end and the best outcome and treatment in the best interest of customers at the end of the day. So, you've got to find a balance between those two, and notwithstanding the evolution that you're going to be seeing in the king codes of governance that we're going to see. What is, however, important, Anton mentioned very early on in his session of the omni risk return that officially is going to, it substitutes and replaces the omni CBR that was heard of before. But essentially, this omni risk return is going to take the shape and format of what is expected to be regulatory reporting back to the supervisory bodies in the market into the future. Right now, there is a template out in the market. It's got 12 tabs and an Excel sheet, and it's calls for business understanding its information. So understanding how it operates, understanding the interrelationships it might have with other businesses or parties to their organizations. So the higher the complexity of the organization, the more stringent these requirements are going to be, the more time they're going to take and consume. But there is this big discussion and commentary around proportionality. So small business by implication has the same onerous requirements that any big business would have in terms of their compliance obligations. But it's how they get there. And I like to take a very much pragmatic approach in that. So an FSP has regulatory obligations, as do I as a compliance professional. But as long as there's a mutual and collaborative relationship, then one can reach the goals that are intended at the end of the day in a meaningful manner. There are one or two persons in the session this morning, which are new clients to me. And I mean, the comments and the conversation that we've been having on the back of what compliance is and should and could be is something of, it seems to be a new conversation, although it should not be. I think businesses find themselves particularly challenged with embedding process, consistency in process. I mean, if we take something as simple as a representative in an FSP that is placed under supervision, how real is the supervision aspect of that representative that should be embedded in the system, that should be a trigger towards competence in that area? How well is it managed? How well is it documented? So again, we come back to the use of technology being a very capable environment to help support a big component of what compliance is. But it's not just the system that is the fix at the end of the day. It's the nurturing, it's the building of that system. So under COFI, we're talking about, Anton mentioned, a client engagement policy. Is a policy necessary in every single instance in the different environments? Well, it depends what that policy is aiming to achieve. It is either a statutory obligation and therefore a very compulsory directive from a market interest perspective to have something in place. A common example of that is the risk management and compliance program under FICA. That is it's a very high obligation. It's a high priority obligation for any business that is an accountable institution and therefore FICA obligated. But your RMCP essentially forms the manual of what you need to do in your business, what you decide in your business to do to meet compliance. And a system functionality forms the basis of that capability. So if we think of FSPHub as an example, you have the ability to build a process, to build a workflow, to essentially have a blueprint, which is an alternative version of what is intended to be a documenting of your processes and procedures. It then brings about consistency in your practice. So if you're a business with 10 advisors and you as a key individual in your business have an opportunity to and an obligation to oversee and manage the delivery of financial services to the end user, which is your customer, by having a workflow and a blueprint in place that is consistent, that is adopted and embraced and implemented in an organization, your outcome at the end of the day with your client is much more positive. It's much more efficient. It has a record that is kept with an audit trail, which is, we talk about the concept of traceability. When you think about the spirit of what the FASE Act has tried to achieve in cases that have gone to the ombuds offices, is there traceability in the efforts that you as a business might make as an FSP or representatives in that FSP in terms of what the outcomes are to the end user of financial products? And there's a myriad of these things. And I like to take a very pragmatic, very realistic approach. And having involvement in the Compliance Institute of South Africa as well, there are mechanisms, there are tools out there that help you prioritize your agenda in terms of compliance. And it is about, again, Anton mentioned, rely on your compliance officer to support your process. At the end of the day, this conversation around compliance is quite a sticky one because it's not a well-received discussion at the end of every day. However, the focus should always be license protection first, then risk management, and embedded in that transition of a chain of events that you will see is what is the outcome for the customer, what is the reputation of the business, and do we collectively uphold the integrity of the industry? And it really is a chain of events, and there's a systematic flow to that. Without your license, you can't practice. And to some degree, the COFI structuring will bring about some relicensing aspects based largely on your business activities. Accountability is going to be something that is key. There may be something in that where even compliance officers become to some small extent accountable for your execution and accountable for your success in compliance. But it is a chain of events, and we're talking about conduct, client standards, upholding the integrity of the industry, meeting the regulatory standards, but not only meeting it. ensuring that there's a level of compliance maturity into the future, that businesses become resilient and don't keep looking over their shoulders when there is a request for a report. I have a very, very big philosophy from a compliance consulting, from a compliance practitioner perspective, compliance officer perspective. If you do not have reporting in your environment, you cannot corroborate in any way, shape, or form what your blind spots are. You cannot corroborate in any way, shape, or form the extent to which you comply. Written documents, audit trails, reporting are means and tools to prioritize what needs to be complied with. And I think that whole ecosystem is something that does need to come together holistically. And I think it can be very, very well embedded inside technology, but there are aspects of technology that cannot support the achievement of compliance because human intervention remains key from an ethical perspective at the same time, but more specifically, convenience is in the process, changing of the process, decisions around your process. Again, going back to this RMCP function, the risk management and compliance program, when you take a decision to change something in your FICA compliance manual, so to speak, you have to have a documented, audited record of the change that has been taken, the decision that's been taken over that, and then there needs to be an executive level approval in terms of that, depending on what the nature of your environment will be. So very important that these sticky points become a means of a priority matrix of some sort and systematically working through that priority matrix. All risk management, all compliance obligations can be well managed through a very well constructed risk register. Your compliance officer should be talking heavily about the management of a risk register. We've seen it in regulatory inspections. We've seen it in product providers looking into FSPs, asking them for submissions on to verify and corroborate the extent of compliance that exists. And a very key component is that a risk register should exist in any environment. Whether you're a financial services provider or an external business operating in some shape or form, a risk register keeps you informed, the level of risk that you're prepared to take, what risk exists before you have any compliance at play, what processes, procedures, controls do you have in play, and then furthermore, what is your remaining risk? And what remaining risk will require, what intervention does it require for you to reduce your risk completely? There are certain tick box items which are very, very easy to achieve, and those are routine in the business, something like submitting your financials. But do the financials truly meet the financial soundness requirements that are envisaged in the Act? So that's just one example. But now you go the route of saying, well, the routine stuff can be taken care of, but where's the risk management behind that? You know, when you're looking at client advice files as the key individual in an organization, how do you manage the risk? How do you control the monitoring procedures so that it's not a missed opportunity in the business to continue to uplift your business practice? So, Tony, there's a big conversation here. I invite a very collaborative, very consultative approach with my clients. Whether you're a client or not to me, I'm also open for that conversation. But we can see the ecosystem that needs to come together must be one that resonates with business, must be one that resonates with those parties who want to become mature in compliance, those parties who wish to remain sustainable into the future of what this industry will be. I believe it's a very significant industry to be a part of. There's lots of lessons learned. It's a great space to be a part of, both in compliance, both in brokerage, both in the collective discussion. And I think anyone in this audience could do well to remain central and part of the ongoing conversation as the regulatory developments take place. But have a look at, don't wait. Again, Anton said exactly the right thing. Don't wait for something to be promulgated. There is a risk-based approach, which is a previous envision of the regulators and the registrars in the market. Are you truly practicing the risk-based approach in your environment? Do you know what should be prioritized? What is the highest impact in your business? And do you know how to deal with it? And I think that's the kind of support, that's the kind of conversation that a small, medium, large enterprise requires, bearing in mind that a small one-person business, a five-person business, does not have the same capacity to achieve compliance outcomes in the same way that a big multi-conglomerate might have capability of, simply because the bigger organization has the ability to employ compliance teams within their environment. And the smaller player in the market relies very much so on the external party becoming a partner in their business, a reliable one, to help coach the compliance, to help implement the compliance. Because it's very easy to put a policy in place, but is it correctly implemented at the same time? Do you have a measure of adherence in terms of what you're aiming to achieve through policy? So Tony, as we can hear, there's a big conversation there. I don't want to take up too much time, and I'd like to hand over back to you to see if there's any more comments that may come from that.
Brilliant, Jaco. Thank you very much for sort of framing that for us. I think, as you say, a big conversation. I've got so many questions, and I'm sort of trying to picture, what would in a short period of time add the most value. So I think maybe to just look at two of the things that I was thinking of that came up for me is the one is with regards to PI cover and compliance. And maybe you would be better to answer into this. What sort of input and requirement from a PI cover perspective do you add or do you require from your clients in terms of PI cover? Where does that monitoring or ensuring compliance come in?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tony. Thank you for asking that one, because it is exactly one of the reasons why we started that business. We saw that the better you've embraced some of the phase principles, there's an additional underwriting that we can do on behalf of the FSP. And we've got an arrangement that if we go through the advice process and we have seen the advice documents, if I, with my experience with the Ombuds Office and testifying as an expert witness in the High Court, I've got the ability to see and testify to the quality of those advice documents. So with that help and with the compliance officer's report, I've got an arrangement with one of the underwriters that if the advisor practice follows those principles, I would be able to get a 15% discount on the premium. And then at the back end, if we know what the evidence is at the front end, we've added value to the FSP in the middle in the period of being insured. And if there's a hiccup, we can then with more expertise come in and give the underwriter an evaluation of what we should be doing. Is it something that we just need to push back to the ombud, which I've done in many cases? We've seen the evidence, and listen, I know this is recorded, so I'm going out on a limb here. But my experience has been that the Ombuds Office is unbelievably aggressive towards FSPs. They are trying to get FSPs to settle, and they give them 100% of pushback and say, we advise you to settle. I've had 2 matters in the last year where I could not believe, with the evidence that we've given to the Ombuds Office, that the case managers were pressing, and we had to draw a line and say, guys, I'm sorry. You've got our motivation, you've got our court cases and everything. We want you to take it to a determination. And only at that point that the Ombud come back and say, we find in favor of the... So I need the FSPs to be aware on this platform that I'm not happy with the way that the Ombuds Office are dealing with advisors now. I'm sorry to say that. I probably am going to have backlash. I hope there's nobody from the FSCA or the Ombuds Office on this line, but I'm happy to defend my statements because I've got the evidence to prove it.
Yeah, Anton, I don't think that what you're saying should be a challenge, because, I mean, when I look at any business, and if I look at the Ombudsman as from an operational perspective, it's also about efficiency on their side and trying to get the cases out as soon as possible. And if they can get a settlement, they'll take a settlement, and push for that. And I think advisors should obviously be aware of that. But thank you very much for that clarity, because I asked that question because I was thinking about medical malpractice. And I know that with COFI coming in and the compliance burden and the almost the complicated compliance environment that we're moving into, if we don't manage as an advisor industry, if we don't manage compliance and the fallout of that in terms of liabilities, etc., the PI cover is going to get too expensive, similar to what happened with medical malpractice. And therefore, we need to, at an early stage, control how we manage PI cover and claims that are being paid, etc., to ensure that PI cover stays affordable, because otherwise it's going to run away and it's going to become this massive issue in our industry to be able to afford PI cover.
Yeah, I agree. If I may close on that topic from my side, that's exactly what we are trying to achieve, Tony, because we believe if the trusted advisor community can be a low-risk community for the underwriters, we will be able to get preferential rates. So the more people that actually embrace this phase to COFI transition and they get their policies and procedures implemented, we've got first-hand of experience and we can submit those, and then we can do on a yearly basis, we can assess the risk profile of the trusted advisor community. And that should then be able to help us to get more sensible premiums.
Yeah. And I want to go into a little bit more the business aspect of all of that. And obviously, I'd like comments from Sean, Jaco, and yourself, Anton, on this. But when I listened to this, and Jaco made a very interesting statement that sort of speaks to this in terms of every advisory practice is going to be different. And this stems from the fact I look at myself as a small business owner, is you have certain strengths and you have certain weaknesses in terms of what you do and how you do it. You also have certain expertise, etc. And so when we look at your business or your practice, the advisory business from a business perspective, and preparing for COFI, etc. So you've got two sides. The one is obviously you can use technology, and this is where FSPHub comes in to assist you, etc. But on the one hand, you need somebody to take responsibility for the implementation, making sure that the workflows are set up correctly, making sure that they are continuously managed correctly, because a system is only as good as the input that you give it. And then on the other hand, you need somebody with some sort of expertise within the business. Whether you've got somebody like Jaco or not, you still need somebody inside the practice that would be managing that relationship, knowing what to hand over, when to hand it over, how to interact with the compliance side of the business. So my question then, and maybe we'll start with Anton, is do you kick off this process by looking at what is this advisory practice? What is in this business? What strengths and weaknesses? What skill sets, etc., before you even start thinking about how do they comply?
Great question, Tony. I must say, but believe it or not, I've got a well thought through answer prepared for you, because we had to consider this question for our small business on the PI side. And we have decided to deal with it differently. We have decided that there are certain rules that apply to everyone. It's almost like a triangle, where the bottom area, for example, client engagement in the advice process, it's like when the Springboks run onto the rugby field, all the rules apply to them. So in other words, your client engagement process where the advisor deals with, whether they're part of a bank, a private wealth business, massive business with 200, 500 reps, whether you're a one-man show dealing with clients. We try to identify the rules that apply to everybody. And we've decided that we are going to start our implementation process with all the rules that apply to you, whether you're big or small. That pyramid, at the top end, you'll get the big businesses. And the higher you go up with the number of infrastructure, capabilities, resources, etc. Some banks have got 20 compliance officers and managers working in that business. So obviously, they will have many more policies and procedures, etc. But we as a small business said we need to be a proxy, a blueprint of what we deliberate, what we put in our policies and procedures. And if we don't have a certain policy in place, we need to go to the regulator. Because here's the trick. The regulator has not defined proportionality. Nobody in this industry knows exactly how the FSCA is going to apply proportionality. They don't either with respect to them. If they did, we would have a guidance note or whatever. So, Tony, your question was such a loaded question. And that's why I think it's fortunate for Trusted Advisors PI Solutions to be in exactly the same position as a small business, so that we can utilize all the research that we have done and put a model to the regulator to say, guys, from a capacity point of view, from a proportionality point of view, this is what we have done. And we can confidently share with you, this is all that a small business will need.
Thanks, Anton. Great stuff. Sean, from your perspective, in terms of using technology to implement the workflows, implement the necessary processes and procedures in the business, how does when a client approaches you and you are looking at implementing FSPHub into the practice, how do you look at the human resources, the person driving the process of implementation, etc.? The reason I'm asking is, if you're a small business, how do you do that, and how do you maintain that? You know, what is the necessary requirements for a practice?
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I mean, we are not prescriptive. This is where, you know, people like Jaco are of assistance to us, and, you know, the brokerage would talk to their compliance officer and so on. We are not FSPs, and, you know, it's a conversation that we have, but, you know, we can only do so much within the system. I think Jaco alluded to that. You know, Anton spoke about, you know, the conduct and the processes in the practice and the client engagement and the advice process. Only so much of that can be built into the system for monitoring and reporting and so on. But there are key legal aspects from a compliance perspective that will have to sit outside of the system. So we can only do so much from within the system in terms of the reporting and, you know, setting the system up. We have examples of processes, and we rely on people with expertise like Jaco to say, you know, because often we onboard let's take a small brokerage, and they will say, can you help us with some templates of workflows and so on, onboarding clients and managing, you know, the life cycle of the client, whether it's claims or exiting or whatever it may be, and as part of the advice process as well. So, you know, we leverage, if the practice is not sure, we leverage people like Jaco to assist with that and provide some guidance, and we build that into the system as much as is required, and we assist with the review of that as well.
Yeah. We've got Craig on this call as well. Craig, I can see you are jumping at the bit there to add a little bit of value. You're the technology expert with decades of technology implementation expertise. Yeah, you can tell us a little bit as to, that process and embedding it and making it part of the business and the workflow.
Thank you, Tony. One of the advantages of FSPHub is our workflow tooling that's in the system. It's exceptionally comprehensive. It can be very rigorous and strict, or it can be lenient, very easy and uncomplicated to configure and set up. So for any compliance person or any person wanting to implement standard operating procedures with checks and balances, enforcing certain disciplines to include certain documentation, having quality assessment reviews on workflows and work that has happened within your business, and also to be able to measure, monitor, and control who's doing what, when, and how, speaks all to how you conduct your business in the correct manner. And taking into compliance frameworks, we can customize and build those workflows together with our clients in order to incorporate it and embed it automatically into the business. So hence they're using FSPHub's workflow solution to automatically do a lot of their compliance steps. The other nice aspect of FSPHub is that we've got a single view of the client, and we work across all the insurance disciplines. So you're not just having a look at your life, wealth, investment, health, and short-term in isolation. You've got a holistic view of that client and how you've been dealing with that client. The communication in and out of the system is recorded against the client. So email, WhatsApp, SMSs, all documents. So everything's in a central repository, and it's very quick and easy and convenient to understand what has happened with the client and how has that brokerage or broker or advisory dealt with that client from a audit perspective, or a compliance officer needs to check how things were done. It is very visual, very transparent.
Yeah, all about control and insight.
Correct.
Craig, thanks so much for that. Jaco, just on the topic that we're discussing now, from your perspective in terms of the different clients that you work with, Anton spoke about eating the elephant in bits. Can a business also use a compliance officer, external compliance officer like yourself, in bits? How do you do that? Is it all in, or is it, okay, we'll take on this part, or we'll take on that part, or we'll get you on the road and then you're on your own? How do you look at structuring the business to be ready to work towards COFI compliance?
100%. Tony, very good question, because I mean, there's also a question in the chat box here that I'm seeing from Liana, just as an indication. So is COFI and CBR only about practice management, governance, and the advice process? Well, it's not only about that. I mean, that's just an element of business conduct. It's about, do you know what your business is about? And I think we all relate to the term that you don't know what you don't know. And it's often useful to get a different perspective. There does seem to be some resistance to change in the market. So if you think about the law makes it compulsory for any business that has got one or more reps or key individuals in their business to have a compliance officer. That compliance officer can be a full internal, full-time employed person, or it can be an external appointment such as myself. However, to consult with me, I do make my services available on a project-specific basis. In other words, the existing landscape who has already got a compliance officer need not terminate their compliance services unnecessarily if there is a good relationship, but maybe they need more time and effort on certain specific projects. Maybe the project is protection of personal information, data and information security. Maybe the project is FICA, and I could do that on a consultative basis for a period of time. But typically, all of that intervention does come inclusive of anyone that wished to appoint me on a retainer basis as their external compliance officer. So I tend to want to learn about the business up front before I then take that business on. I also then tend to want to walk the journey with the client holistically for the long term, and really make sure that the blind spots that do become uncovered are then taken care of as a license protection measure, but also a reputational protection measure for that FSP. I mean, different FSPs operating in different areas, different capabilities, different product lines, different levels of interpretation that go into aspects of running a business. These are all key differentiators and why different businesses will be different. So, I mean, you can have one FSP that's a 3-person brokerage and another one that's exactly the same, selling and marketing exactly the same product lines, exactly the same product houses that are out there, but their delivery is different to the client. Their relationship to the client is different. The culture and the practice in the business becomes very different. So I'm definitely of the view that strengths comes with collaboration and longer term relationships. I would also even welcome a collaboration with an existing compliance practice where they're taking care of some aspect of it, but where low hanging fruit is not being taken care of, and it might be highly impactful to a particular business, that aspect then be addressed through a certain sort of unique niche specialized channel. Just to go back to Liana's question, we're talking about the concept of being able to derive management information in your practice. And I stem that conversation from the concept of reporting. I say again, if you don't have reporting in your business, you can't inform your business sufficiently well in terms of where the deficiencies might be that require prioritized attention. My focus with clients will always be reporting, work through a constructive aspect in a level of priority, which may impact the business quite highly in any facet, but there's got to be a report on the back of everything, which takes the shape of a risk register and then an overall summarized executive report at the end of the year. But there's got to be reporting. If you don't have reporting, you don't know where you're good and you don't know where you're lacking. And I think that's probably one of the big challenges, certainly in the small to medium space, in terms of the size of FSPs, Tony. And it really is a grapple for, does the practice decide to serve the client, which is what is envisaged in the market by the registrar and the regulators. But whilst compliance takes a back seat, you're going to lose out on something that you need to be taken care of, which then can supplement your delivery to the client at the end of the day, supplement the way that you practice with your clients at the end of the day. So compliance absolutely needs to be integrated as part of your business practice. It is certainly in many ways, shape and forms, a compass for your strategic direction in the business.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jaco. Good clarity. Anton, just maybe to ask you there, the survey that you spoke about, 150 point that you are narrowing down a little bit, I suppose that takes into account trying to assist people to identify where do they as a business fit into what their approach should be.
Yes, we think that it's almost like a SWOT analysis, a COFI SWOT analysis, because I do not believe you'll be able to formulate a strategy if you don't really know where your gaps are. So that to us is a starting point. That will be a free service for any person to go through the COFI assessment, get a COFI report on what it is you need to fix in your business. So you've got a dashboard, and that would be the first step. The second step would be, and I just want to make the point, Jaco, I passionately support the role of a compliance officer. We are not a compliance officer. In fact, on our PI insurance business, we cannot take on clients who are their own compliance officers. We believe that the COFI environment should not allow any FSP to operate without a compliance officer, purely because a compliance officer fulfills the role of a linesman. The ombud or the FSCA is the ref, and if the Springboks play, they've got a linesman that's qualified that can check if Bakkies Botha have got a steel shot there, and they can, those kind of things. That's their role. You cannot be the captain of the team, the player in the team, and the linesman in the team. So under a COFI environment, I passionately support the service that Jaco is rendering. What we believe we can do is to collaborate with compliance officers. We don't compete with them. Our idea with FSP Business 4.0 is not to replace a compliance officer, because that monitoring is of essential value for the managing down of risk. I just want to clear the air there, so it's not in competition. You are going to need extra assistance, because Jaco, with the greatest of respect, a compliance officer has got limited time. one of the biggest challenges of all our stakeholders is capacity. We got 24 hours a day. I work with colleagues, like I sit at night until 11, 12 o'clock at night to do what I need to do. So I engage with colleagues at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. We are exhausted as a business. There's no ways that a compliance officer can man alone deal with the capacity of this COFI aspect. So I want to reach out and say, guys, maybe it's time in an affordable way for us to collaborate, and we'll send the templates to your clients. We'll go through the training exercise of CPD approved. Everybody can go on a journey, an early adopter journey. There are the templates, and then you can dust it off with your compliance officer. So we're going to free up Jaco's time, and he can bring a qualitative service to you. But the day for a one-man show to be a consultant here, I'm exhausted. I simply have given up doing it alone.
Absolutely. I think Johan Maria made a very interesting comment here, which is something that is so super important, is if you run your practice like a business, you will comply. And I think it's a challenge for any entrepreneur, not just in financial services or in brokerages, etc. I take my own business, is you can very easily, as Anton said, be the player, the captain, and the linesman in your own business. And that way, you simply cannot get to everything. You cannot comply. You have to look at your practice as a business and look at your role within that business. What is the role that you play in that business? And how do you take care of all the other functions in the business? And obviously, where we are at the moment in business, in industry, in whatever you do, not just financial services, technology is essential. You cannot run a business without technology. I think there is almost no area of business where you will be competitive. We're getting to the close of this, so we've just got 2 or 3 minutes. So I think I want to start off with Anton, if you can make a comment for me about, and we'll go through all 4 of you and just ask you to answer this one question. Can you use, and how can you use compliance as a competitive advantage against your competitors? Anton.
You've got to have a mindset. You've got to have a growth mindset. If you've been complaining about compliance for the last 21 years, and you are still moaning about the record of advice that has been implemented for 21 years under phase, you're going to have a bad time trying to find the positives in the COFI bill. So my answer to that would be change your mindset. Stop your grown mindset. Look at a grasp mindset, which is a grown mindset going to a grasp mindset, saying, maybe I'll be open to the positives in COFI. Let me listen if there are areas to make compliance, turn it into a trust-building exercise. There are many examples where those provisions, if you do them, it builds trust. So it's just the perspective, those 3 mindsets. A grown mindset, it's going to be tough for you under COFI. If it was bad under phase, it's going to be worse under COFI. Get a grasp mindset. Be opened up to say, how do I use the COFI bill and the transition to my advantage? And then about 1% of the industry, maybe more, has got a growth mindset. And those are the early adopters. Those are the guys saying, COFI is coming. What can I do to improve my business and surpass the minimum standard that COFI puts on us?
Thanks, Anton. Jaco, your comment there.
Yeah, so Tony, I definitely, again, resonate with Anton, but it's a culture shift. Change the culture of what your business embraces in compliance. If you embrace culture, your governing body or the person of highest authority in the business has the attention, the focus that they need to in managing those arrangements in the business, everything comes out in what you do in practice. There's got to be a culture of training. There's got to be a culture of upliftment. There's got to be a culture of documenting processes and procedures and really truly embedding it as part of the business activity. As an end result, the favor that you get is the experience of the client at the end of the day. And that be the difference between whether it's a corporate client where you're dealing with a significant executive team or you're dealing with high net worth individuals. I think the pillar of focus in terms of where this aspect comes from into the future is this industry is going to be built on trust. And trust becomes the biggest driver of reward in terms of every business aspect that you portray to this market.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And Sean, your thoughts, closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, coming from the technology angle, I would say, embed everything into technology, your business culture, how you treat your clients, and importantly is consistency. You treat your client in a particular way today, tomorrow exactly the same event occurs, and you treat him now in a different way. And that makes the client unhappy and uncomfortable and have questions around the advisor's ability. So consistency throughout, build your business culture into your technology so that your staff, it doesn't matter whether you're a 1 or 2 person operation or a bigger intermediary practice, the consistency is there and the standards are there. I think that's, a major step in the right direction, in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Sean. Craig.
Yeah, I echo everyone's sentiments. Embrace technology. Technology helps you enable your business and it will help you streamline and make compliance easy. So you've got some experts on your screen that can advise. We, the technologists, we can embed compliance technology into your business and make it as seamless as possible. It shouldn't be something that you do on the side. It should be something that happens while you're doing your work, and the technology needs to assist you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tony. And thank you to everyone else that has attended and appreciate the conversations.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. It's a conversation that can go on for quite a long time. I saw some of the comments there in terms of breaking down the requirements, etc. So a lot of work to be done into the future. But Anton, Jaco, thank you very much for your time. Craig, thanks for stepping in as well. And just from a technology perspective, and Sean, it's great to have you guys on here. And yeah, we look forward to putting out a bit more information into the future as to how we will all eat this elephant to make sure that the industry lives up to expectations for clients. So thank you very much. And thanks for everybody that attended. We have recorded this. We will do some feedback on this. We will also do some summaries, etc. And so look out for that. And remember that you do get CPD for this. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Great session. Thanks for sharing.